I now thoroughly believe that the relationship between Optimus and Megatron is that of Batman and the Joker. They just can't exist without each other, because if Optimus had killed Megatron during the chances that he has gotten, this would all be over. Why does he keep doing this? Hello everyone, Davey here. So it's been a while since I've done a review for almost anything Transformers related. After all, that's practically where my entire career, my YouTube career of reviewing things stemmed from wanting to do reviews on Transformers. I mean, it kind of kicked off with my Spider-Man figures, but I mainly wanted to do Transformers. It's just that when I started, Transformer figures from the first Michael Bay movie weren't out yet, so that's the reason why I started off with Spider-Man and then worked my way up to Transformers, from the movie lines to the different type of stuff, to lately the masterpiece Optimus Prime figure, and now here I am to review a Transformers game that I had no idea was coming out, at least not the initial actual release date. I knew it was coming sometime this year. I've heard about it here and there, but I didn't know it was already out. I saw it on Redbox. I had a little coupon to get a free rental. I was like, sure, let's go ahead. You know, it's not like I've heard rumors that this game is just 5 hours long. Okay, perhaps I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but let me go ahead and start off by saying that here is my review for the latest Transformers video game, Transformers Devastation. And in this game we find our Autobots fighting once again the evil legions of the Decepticons led by Megatron. This time he is trying to cyberform planet Earth with this brand new Cybertronian artifact that he finds once again, and so it's up to the Autobots to stop him. If you're a very die-hard Transformers fan, one that has followed the legacy of Transformers ever since it was first started back in 1984 with the original G1 series, then you should be very familiar with that kind of premise for a story that involves Transformers, because I feel like the best way that I can describe the story for this game is that essentially it's another Transformers Saturday morning cartoon that now has been translated to become a video game. The premise is there. Megatron is trying to destroy Earth and create his own version of Cybertron, and Optimus, being the leader of the Autobots and being this idealist that wants to create a new Cybertron, but at the same time doesn't want to destroy any other kind of biological life, and because he's compassionate for all sentient beings, must stop him. And it's the same type of beat for beat story that we've dealt with in the Transformers legacy thus far, and that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's just something that kind of is there. That's just come to be expected from Transformers. It's a basis for the movies, for every incarnation of the show, from G1 to Armada to Beast Wars to the most recent interpretations to Prime. It's the same basis, and I can't really fault the game for that. But I do kind of wish that they would have tried something just a little bit different. It's actually something that I wish anybody that tackles Transformers would try differently, whether it be the movies or the shows or the video games. I wish that they would kind of stretch their muscles, their creative muscles, in creating something a little bit more complex for Transformers that can still have things that cater for the kids, for the new folk that are trying to get into Transformers, and then people who have loved them from the start. But this game is just a little bit too faithful to that original G1 premise, in which it's very simple, it's kind of cheesy at parts, but at the same time it makes for a good base to start off a video game such as this. And the one thing that I do have to commend that premise is that it brings back our original characters. They're all voiced by the same people: Peter Cullen, Frank Welker, Greg Berger as Grimlock, and the rest of the cast. They're all G1 alumni. And they're all lending their voices and breathing lives into these characters that feel like faithful interpretations of their characters. Optimus cares about sentient beings, even to an extent the Decepticons. He doesn't flat out say they're going to die, like in recently Age of Extinction. He wants to like flat out kill that guy, and I'm like, what the hell, Optimus? Why are you being such a dick? But the one thing I do have to give props to the writer, who was this comic writer for the Transformers comics, that's a little bit seasoned in that department. There is a little bit of an emotional twist towards the end. It's not a huge plot twist that, oh my god, it's not like that, but it's a situation that presents itself that I did find it to be quite interesting, and added a layer of creativity to the already rather generic plot for a generic yet very accustomed premise for a Transformers property that we've already seen time and time again. There's a situation towards the end that I did find was a little bit interesting and a little bit of a wrinkle added to that plot towards the end that I was like, okay, this is a situation that I could definitely appreciate because it made for some good tension. And beyond that, if you couldn't already tell, the design for Transformers this time around is not this, different, fresh take. It doesn't look like the Bay movies, but at the same time, this is not made from the people who made the War for Cybertron, Fall of Cybertron games. Therefore, they don't look like a mixture between the Bay and the G1. This is just flat out G1. They use cel shading technology to make the Transformers look like they did in their cartoon series back in 1984, and it does add a level of nostalgia. Not so much to me because it was a little late in the game. Beast Wars was where it was at for me, but for anybody who has stuck around since that original Generation 1 of Transformers, when they play this and they see all these character models, they're going to feel right at home, and combining that with the voice talent that I just mentioned, oh my god, you guys are just gonna go insane. So since it is a video game, let's talk about the gameplay. This is a third-person action game developed from the people over at Platinum Games. Now, these are the people responsible for the Bayonetta games, for the wonderful 101, God, I'm blanking on the name. There was just one other game that recently came, or some time ago came out. I can't remember. But beyond that one other game, there's this other game that I recently played, probably last month or the month before that, called Vanquish, which was directed by the guy who did Resident Evil. This doesn't have the director of Resident Evil, but it's from the same developers. And all of these games I just mentioned, including Transformers Devastation, have a similar style to them, where it is hectic as hell. If you're not a huge fan of games that have a lot of action, and I mean frenetic action, just bouncing back and forth in your face with a bunch of lights, a bunch of sounds, if you're epileptic, don't play any games from Platinum Games. Just don't do it. But that's the type of game that you're in for when you jump into any of those games, and this one with just, sound effects just booming, chaotic, just chaos all over the place. This really fast-paced, very much frenetic combat, along with this soundtrack that's rather not in your face, but in your ears, with like some heavy metal, just like just like that. Those other games were just like that. If you play the Bayonetta games, you know what I'm talking about. And this game is no exception. It just swaps that skin for a Transformers Generation 1 skin, in which you just got Transformers in that type of style, and that's the type of combat that you're in for. You mash the square button for light attacks, you mash the triangle button for heavy attacks, or whatever, the corresponding face buttons that you're, depending on the console that you're playing. And then once you string together a set amount of combos and you build up some momentum, you can then execute a vehicle attack with the or the right bumper button that also allows you to transform. And so stringing all these different moves together did make for some rather satisfying combat that's very fast-paced. It's never boring. At least at certain times it isn't. I'll talk about that more in a bit. I can't wait to get into it. But the combat is very much fun, and it's always at its best when you get into the groove of things, especially when you manage to transform between vehicle mode and robot mode, because you can do that. It wouldn't be a Transformers game if you couldn't be... Oh my god. I would lose it if anybody would have the balls to make a game, a Transformers game, in which you don't transform. That would be sacrilege. It's almost like making a Transformers figure that doesn't transform. I'm sorry, Hot Toys, but I'm not buying that, ever. But jumping from vehicle to robot and stringing together these moves and being able to shoot with some mild shooting mechanics. This game does have some shooting mechanics here and there where you can either shoot your blasters in robot mode, or you pull out this gun in vehicle mode and you're able to shoot at enemies. And where you're able to time your attacks just right and also dodge at the precise moment where an enemy is about to attack you, you're able to enter focus mode, in which everything slows down and you're able to get in some hits and defeat your enemies that way. And stringing together all these different moves, like I said, made for some rather satisfying combat. That is, of course, when the game's not being a dick. Yeah, here's the thing. Platinum Games, not only are they known for their very frenetic action, they're also known for spiking their difficulty levels just unrelentlessly up. And I haven't played every single game in their repertoire. In fact, some of the Bayonetta games, I haven't played them. I did play Vanquish, and there was this one other game that was on that list that I saw on Wikipedia that I did play, but I'm just blanking on the name. But this game is no exception when it comes to that difficulty that I found to be quite unbalanced. I may be sounding like a bitch right now, like, oh my god, it was too hard. But at least offer different modes, because here's my situation, here, or rather, I should say, frustration with the difficulty in this game. Whenever I start a new game, I always choose the normal setting. Of course, sometimes, depending on the game, they change up the wording. For this game, easy is Scout, normal's Warrior, and then Commander, I think, is the hard. I can't remember what the name for the Commander, for the hard difficulty was. But I chose normal. I went for the middle one, I chose normal. That's how I always do whenever I start a new game. I can barely make it through the first chapter without dying like 2 or 3 times. Because here's the deal. The game introduces some enemies, some rather routine, generic looking enemies. But this is during the tutorial phase, teaching you how to attack, how to block, how to dodge, that kind of thing. I'm like, okay, pretty basic stuff. Enter Devastator! I'm not kidding. 10, maybe 15 minutes into the game, boom, Devastator appears. First boss battle. I'm like, okay. I wasn't necessarily complaining because I was like, okay, you're not holding back on the boss battles. And the game really doesn't hold back on the boss battles. Sometimes a little too much, to the point where it starts to reuse boss battles, just taking some and combining them. And I'm like, okay, no pun intended on that one. But I'm able to forgive that. But the difficulty. Oh my god, the difficulty. As soon as Devastator popped out, I'm like, okay, he's going to be a little bit challenging, but it's early on in the game. I'm fighting Devastator, I'm landing a series of attacks, and his health bar is barely moving. It's barely moving. He hits me like once, a good 5th or 4th of my health bar, gone. I'm like, what? What is this? And I'm using up my items that I have been able to garnish so far, like my restore my health, restore the energy to some of my weapons, that kind of thing. Maybe equipping some new weapons to my character, the character that I'm playing as, because you only play as Autobots this time. Unlike War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron, you only play as one of 5 Autobots in between chapters. And after the first chapter, you can actually choose whichever Autobot you get to choose from, but only in the arc. It's also in this arc where you can change the difficulty, and here's where the frustration kind of grows for me, is that after a while, I can't do it. I cannot do it. I can't beat this. I keep using up all my health, and I'm just going around in circles, and the game is just so frustratingly difficult. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to do it because I really want to burn through this game, and I'm renting it for Redbox. I don't want to keep it any more than I have to, otherwise they're going to keep charging me for every day that I'm keeping it. So I go into this arc, it says right there, change the difficulty. I'm like, okay, I'm going to change it to easy. 2 very frustrating things happen. 1, the chapter starts from the very beginning. It doesn't just automatically change the difficulty and the game balances itself out. No, you have to start from the very beginning of that chapter and work your way back to where that section in the game where you are allowed to jump into the arc via this little icon comes across again. Okay, frustration number 1. Number 2, the game then gets ridiculously easy. Easy to the point where the combat, though satisfying, becomes just a tad bit mundane. I mean, now I'm getting attacked, my bar is moving slowly, and their bar is going rather quickly. And there's just no balance. I don't know what was going on here, but I felt like Platinum Games just overdid it with the difficulty in this game. And so far, that is probably my biggest complaint about this game, that just fractures it completely. And I personally feel like it's because of this reason, because of the fact that it's so difficult, that the game ends up being short and becomes criticized for being such a short game considering the price. I mean, the game was initially released with a $50 price tag, and games are usually $60. But the game took me about 5 hours to beat, and it's taking people on average about 4 to 5 hours to beat. That means you're paying about $10 for just an hour of actual gameplay. And the main reason why it was so short is because I had no choice but to switch to that easy difficulty, because then even on normal it's too hard. I will say that on normal it would have taken me around maybe 10 hours, because it took me 2 hours just to do the first chapter. And since there's about 6 chapters, it would have taken me around the neighborhood of maybe 10 to 12 hours on that normal or hard, practically hard, that frustrating difficulty level. But again, it was just too frustrating. It wasn't fun. I wasn't having fun in that difficulty. All right, it wasn't that it wasn't that difficulty in which the enemies were killing me, but every time I died, I would actually progress. That's the type of game that I find satisfying, and I don't get frustrated whenever I die. I'm like, okay, I advance. I wasn't dying at the exact same part. I was actually progressing. I was learning from my mistakes, and I was being rewarded. This game didn't really feel that way whenever I got killed, because of how hard it was. So I had no choice but to switch over to easy, go through the notions whenever I was doing the combat, no matter how fun and good it felt. I felt like I was going through the motions, and I almost felt like I was kind of cheating. And because of that, the game ended up becoming short. I mean, the first chapter took me about 2 hours. Chapter 2 only took me about 30 minutes to beat on that easier difficulty. And there are some side stuff that you could do if you want to prolong the life of this game, whether it be collecting some stuff, some information logs that are scattered throughout the environments, or you want to gain some new items that you can equip your fellow Autobots with, new weapons, new swords, guns, that kind of thing, or simply just gain some more current Cybertronian currency. I can't remember what it was called, but you can then use this currency to develop little attributes that you can create in the Ark and then equip to your Autobots. Or there's these little portals that will then give you side missions to do, but these side missions are practically like little mini games that are also variations of different challenge modes that you can do. There's this challenge mode section in the main menu that you can go, and they're practically like challenge maps. You got a set amount of enemies, defeat a certain amount of enemies in a certain time, or you got enemies from bigger bosses from the game, like Starscream or Thundercracker, and you need to kill them in a certain amount of time, that kind of thing. And there's these bonus stuffs, but never ever that I feel compelled to want to do them. If you're a completist, you could do that stuff, or the game after beating it allows you to go back and jump into any one of the 6 chapters and do them again in a different difficulty. I did not bother with that whatsoever. I didn't feel like elevating my heart pressure any more than it already is. It's funny because the game was so short, so I was thinking to myself that the review was going to be short. I mean, I even have my notes right here, and it's not even a full page. It's not even a full page. But chances are, I rented enough to make this a full-length review like I always tend to do. But, things are never going to change. And things are never going to change for Transformers video games. I still feel like some of the out of the more recent games to come out that are not licensed properties, like War for Cybertron, Fall of Cybertron, and this, Fall of Cybertron will have to still be my favorite, because I did feel like that was a step up in the right direction from War for Cybertron, and it had so many things going for it that I genuinely liked. Transformers Devastation, I understand where the sentiment was. I understand that the people behind it were probably humongous fans of that original Generation 1 of the Transformers cartoon, and were trying to emulate that with its presentation, with its story, and they captivated that, sometimes a little bit too much, but I understand that the heart was there. There was this charm to the nostalgic purposes behind this game. I just wish they would have focused a little bit of that detail over to not only the environments, but also the difficulty, because I felt like changing up the difficulty in this game and balancing it out to make it fun and rewarding would have made for admittedly a short but very sweet piece of Transformers cake. Unfortunately, I didn't feel like that's what I got. So for that, I give Transformers Devastation a high 6 out of 10. I thought it was okay, but man, I felt like this could have been a way better game. But I'm still holding out hope for the right developer to bring us the definitive Transformers experience. So, let me know what you guys thought of Transformers Devastation. I'm sorry if you have played it, but if you have not and would like to still purchase the game after watching my review, then be sure to use the link in the description below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Transformers, Autobots, and Decepticons alike, roll out.